See a couple of members of the public. Is there anyone going to want to make public comment when that opportunity comes up? And I'll take your name down.
Rob, this is Jim. Yes, I would like that, please.
Okay, Jim. Anyone else on here that would like to unmute now and give me your name so I can write you down on the public comment list? Okay, I see Commissioner Shepard has joined us, and it's 4 o'clock. Commissioner Shepard, I've got one person signed up for public comment, and that is Jim Kyle.
Okay, great. And do we have all three commissioners present?
Yes, sir. All three commissioners present.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right, this is Commissioner Shepard. This is the Port of Bellingham Board of Commissioners Commission meeting for Tuesday, November 17th. We continue to operate under a Whatcom County public health emergency, and accordingly, there are two ways to participate in the meeting, one through our conference dial-in, and the second through our Zoom meeting. Link that's available on our website. I'm going to start by opening the public meeting, closing the executive session meeting and opening the public meeting, and I'll start with our roll call. Commissioner Bell.
Present.
Thank you. And Commissioner Briscoe.
Present.
And Commissioner Shepard is present as well. All three commissioners are here. I'm just going to check real quick about our advisory committee meeting schedule. There are no further meetings until 2021 for the Bellingham International Airport Advisory Committee, which is the TAC and the BIAC. We do have a upcoming meeting for the Marine Advisory Committee, or the MAC. It will be Tuesday, December 1st, 2020 at 6 p.m. and that meeting will be on Zoom. Before we move to public comment, we are operating under pandemic rules here, and we are certainly entering a new phase in this experience with pandemic and the local impacts. And our in meetings with our health director this week, she's asked all of us elected officials to just help amplify the message that they are communicating out at the health department, that just like everywhere else in the country, we're seeing a robust number of cases increasing. And it's really incumbent on all of us to do our part, to think hard about those holiday plans. My family just did this, and it's painful, it's difficult, but we are making those hard choices ourselves about how we are traveling, how we are organizing ourselves, and what kind of activities we're involved in. So the quickest way for us to get into the recovery phase is for us to get through this period where we're seeing really high cases that are challenging for our health system to operate under. So I thank you for your help getting us there, and for just recognizing that the challenge of this new phase for our community and our businesses as well. Okay, let's move on to public comment. Is that Jim Kyle who signed up for comment first?
Yes, thank you, Commissioner Shepard. Appreciate those COVID comments. I'd like to say I'm President of the Working Waterfront Coalition, 4102 Linnell Road in Deming. A few comments about our support for action item 4, which would result in a land swap whereby the port would gain ownership of a key parcel in the heart of the designated C Street Marine Trades area. Just three different comments I'd like to make about that. First of all, this does not appear to be an easy lift from a staff standpoint, and it's not a huge story, but we think it's very significant because of the commitment the staff is willing to make to try to make this trade happen. So we think it really there's a larger story here than just
Looks like you are frozen, Mr. Kyle. We are experiencing a windstorm on top of everything else that's going on today, and individuals may be experiencing some challenge with connectivity. We'll see if Mr. Kyle is able to join us again in a moment. Rob, do we have anybody else signed up?
I did not, but real quick call out to the public here. If you'd like to make public comment, please unmute yourself and make yourself known at this time. I'll keep an eye out for Jim. If he pops back in, I'll let you know, Commissioner.
Okay. And we'll continue on with our meeting and reconnect with Mr. Kyle when he's able to. Okay. Next up is our consent agenda. Carrie, if you would please.
Motion to approve consent agenda items A through J.
All right. Are there any questions or comments? Mr. Bell?
None.
Mr. Briscoe? I think you might be muted, Mr. Commissioner Briscoe.
Sorry. Very good. You get me to shut up, huh? Item F. Selling of the vessels. I looked at that list and I had some reservations about the vessel in Blaine, where the person was trying to sell the vessel, and all I got to read was the short content that the staff put in with the agenda. So maybe I see Alan's up there. He can explain what's going on, because someone trying to sell a vessel in these times is going to be pretty tough. And I just want to make sure we give everyone the opportunity to either retain their vessel or the ability to sell it or keep it. It's some people, a boat isn't anything more than something that floats, but to some people, a boat is very important.
Yeah, Commissioner, in talking with the accounting folks, they have worked pretty diligently to attempt to, contact this person. And again, as it says, they've been attempting to sell and were not able to. I don't know if we would have much better opportunity ourselves. Commission chose to hold that one off, give them more time. We could do that.
To my fellow commissioners, I don't know if you read through the three vessels that are going to be auctioned, but two of them, the owners had deceased and family had the vessels, and it appeared that they weren't interested in the vessels. This particular vessel, I don't have a whole lot of history of other than what I read, but it appears that it's a family vessel, and the people, whether the COVID pandemic situation has caused them to fall on hard times and they can't pay the mortgage. I don't know what the situation is there, but I would like to see that particular one pulled at this time. And I'd like to dig into that a little bit further, even if I have to drive over and dig into it personally to find out what's going on there. I certainly don't want to put more pressure on people that are struggling already by doing something that, Rob, if I may ask you to comment, if we can do this. I don't know how restricted we are, but I think at this point in time, with everything that's going on in our county and our country, that this particular family may need a little more time. That's my gut instinct. That's how I feel.
Commissioners, we can pull item F completely from the agenda here, from the consent agenda. We'll bring it back to you in December and have a better understanding of that one vessel, but we'll bring all three of you. Just for cleanliness, let's just pull item F in its entirety, and we'll come back to you in December with item F.
Very good. I would appreciate that.
So, Carrie, if you will, it's the motion less item F.
Yeah, that's fine with me. I don't have any problem with us taking a further look at this. I know communication and sales and everything are all being challenged right now. If more time helps, more time doesn't always help in each case. It very well may not here, but if we want to, we do have one more meeting before the end of the year.
Thank you.
Commissioner Bell, are you okay with that?
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. Any further questions or comments on the consent?
No, I have none.
Carrie, would you read the modified?
Sure. Motion to approve consent agenda items A through E and G through J.
All right, Commissioner Briscoe,
Yes.
Commissioner Bell,
Yes.
and Commissioner Shepard's a yes as well. Carries 3-0. Before we move on, any chance that Mr. Kyle was able to join us again?
Thank you, Commissioner Shepard. I can wait till the second round there.
Great. Why don't you continue with your comments?
Oh, all right. Yeah, I can go back to that if you like. So I was making several points about that land swap. The first, I think, I'm not sure how far I got, but we really appreciate the fact that the staff is willing to commit probably an inordinate amount of time to that project, which would result in an increase of land dedicated to marine trades. And that in itself is very significant. It wasn't a year ago that we were talking about trying to prevent net losses in a language that we were using that disturbed some people, so we went away from that. But this, we have to recognize, this would, if it happened, would be a net gain in land that's used for that purpose. And I think that we need to recognize that would put the Port of Bellingham in a unique position, because so many ports and harbors around the nation are finding a lot of economic pressures to sell land out of the marine trades into potentially higher dollar value uses that are not maritime oriented. So we really appreciate that effort, and thank you for that. It just confirms our confidence that the Port of Bellingham is a partner in our efforts. And again, thank you. That's it.
Thank you, Jim.
All right, appreciate that. We will move on to our first presentation, first and only today, Mr. Birdsall and reallocation of Belhaven slips.
All righty, good afternoon, commissioners. This is Alan Birdsall, the manager of the marinas, and I'm back to give you an update on the reallocation of the Belhaven slips. Just to give you just a quick recap of the events and the situation. This is considering the 40 slips that were assigned to Belhaven that went into receivership back in August. The commission has been discussing and deciding on how to reallocate those slips. And at this point, we have 15 of the Belhaven customers that remain in those slips. All have paid through October, and most through November, so they're current. And 6 have signed the 30-day temporary mortgage agreement through November. Staff continues to work to get the rest of those filled in. At the last commission meeting, the commission requested additional information from staff to do additional research. One was to extend the marketing effort beyond Skagit County, and then to meet with Mike Houston, one of the principal owners of San Juan Sailing, to further investigate a recommendation that he made at the last meeting. Staff did, between both real estate and marinas, we reached out to 12 brokerage companies, charter firms, over the last week and a half. 2 of them did not return phone messages. And we did have a direct contact with 10 of those firms. 2 of the firms were brokerage companies that really were not interested in mortgage slips, but were interested in potential office space. One of them requested additional detail, such as the number of potential slips, sizes, mortgage rates, office availability, and lease rates. And requested an additional contact. Staff will be going back and reaching out to them. They weren't sure if they were interested or not, but wanted additional information. And then the remaining 7 had no interest in expanding to either Bellingham or Blaine or moving to Bellingham or Blaine within the next 5 years. Myself and the Squalicum Harbor Master, Kyle Randolph, met with Mike Houston and Lothar Taylor, both principals at San Juan Sailing, to discuss the recommendation that Mike had, and that was to keep all of the slips that were assigned to Belhaven available for merchant leaseholders, and to allocate those to the existing merchant leaseholders, and if there wasn't enough demand to fill all 40, to provide a sublet program to those folks on the berth change request list or the waiting list that are close to the top, and sublet those to those customers. And then when there was additional demand or additional need by our local merchant leaseholders, that they could put in a request, and then they would get the next available one as we turn those berths over. So we did meet with them. We came up with a good resolve and a good solution. And once we were talking with him, did identify that we have a current program in place called the transitional moorage. It's in the harbor use and regulations. It primarily was set up to utilize commercial fishing slips. In looking at the rules and regulations, we proposed to amend, to change those regulations to expand to include the merchant leaseholder slips. Again, this will allow for subleasing of the allocated slips to those folks that are close to getting permanent assignment off the berth change request list and the waiting list, and then maintains the marina use plan slip allocation to the merchant leaseholders. And as the merchant leaseholders needed additional slips, they would get the next available one. We believe that we have sufficient turnover in those sizes of berths throughout the year at Squalicum Harbor that if we only assign them to those folks that are close to permanent assignment, that any kind of weight would be short if the merchant leaseholders needed to expand. We also discussed an opportunity for the merchant leaseholders to sublet in discussions with Mr. Houston and Mr. Taylor. They requested that if we make any changes for the sublet requiring harbor master written approval for a merchant leaseholder to sublet their slip, that requirement only be for durations that exceed 30 days. This allows for short-term flexibility with the merchant leaseholders, and especially as it comes into the summer season, if our visitor floats get full, some of the overflow goes into the merchant leaseholder slips. You know, they get 2-3 days, a week's worth of moorage, and to go through the effort for written approval for those short-term durations. Both parties agreed that probably a little onerous on the administrative side. So staff would be recommending changes to the harbor rules and regulations that would require the written approval, and then failure would result in those slips coming back to the port and reallocating to other merchant leaseholders. We did discuss these two changes to the harbor rules and regulations with the MAC at the last meeting. MAC was in full support of these changes, and they will be part of additional rules and regulation changes that we'll bring to the commission in the meeting in December as part of the annual review and update to the rules and regulations. So that's the additional information that the commission has requested. The staff has done the additional research, and at this point, with the research and the discussions and public comment, staff would recommend that we work with the merchant. We have the harbor master, Kyle Randolph from Squalicum, to work with the merchant leaseholders to assign the 40 Belhaven slips to the existing merchant leaseholders to meet their current demand. Any of the 40 that are not needed at this point to be assigned to the those customers that are close to the top of the berth change request list or the waiting list, and then to provide notice to the remaining 15 Belhaven customers that they need to either move to Blaine or make other mortgage arrangements by December 31st, 2020. So with that, Commissioners, I'm available for any questions.
All right. Any questions here?
I have a couple.
Go for it.
So, the charter business, do they need these slips immediately this winter, within the next month or 2 months to operate? Say the remaining 15 slips where people are at right now? Do you know the answer to that, Kyle, or Alan?
That I don't know their immediate need for the slips. We did work with them and identified that they have requested a number of slips, but we did not go so far into those discussions to see if they could delay some of those needs for a few additional months.
Okay. How many of the folks, the 15 folks, Alan, do you know, are any of those liveaboards that are more there?
As far as I know, none of those are liveaboards.
Okay. The reason I bring this forward is with our new COVID outbreak, so to speak, not new, it's a COVID outbreak, but the increase of COVID and the time of the year it is, Thanksgiving, Christmas time, our holiday season, which sounds like we're not going to have much of. It may be, and the reason I ask is if our charter people need those slips right now, is maybe we need to extend to the people that can't find some place to go or move. We need to extend some mortgage opportunity until after the first of the year. I don't know if that's palatable to everybody, but it's been a big mess here. We're trying to get it figured out. I think staff and I think the tenants, I think everybody's doing a great job, and I appreciate it. It helps us do our job. I just want to make sure that we show a little compassion to people that might be in a jam, and we can take care of everybody at Blaine. Alan, we're 150% sure of that.
Yes, I did double check with Andy, and he is specifically holding berths open and available, and they have not been assigning any new mortgage customers at this point, waiting for a decision and whether or not they need to accommodate those moves.
So how many requests are there? So there's 40 of those 40 slips. How many requests do we have from the charter and brokerage?
The most recent count that I have is 37, and that includes the 17 that Northwest Explorations submitted in their request last week.
Okay, so we're only talking about 3 remaining, potentially less than 5 remaining.
I think there's more than 40.
Yeah,
Are there only 40 or are there 45?
there's 40.
40. Okay.
And that was the request that they put in talking with San Juan Sailing. They indicated that if they knew berths were available down the line, they may not need all those berths that they had requested, and we can have those same discussions with Northwest X, as Commissioner Briscoe has indicated. Do they need these right now, or can they wait a few months?
I can add a comment to that if you would like. This is a situation where we're looking for a growth opportunity. It's not something that we can grow instantly. So could between Northwest Explorations and ourselves have mortgage for those 15 people? I think the answer would be absolutely yes on a short-term basis, meaning several months.
So let me make sure I understood that correctly. So if these people wanted to sublease from you for a few months here till they get themselves organized or get moved to Blaine or whatever they want to do, that would be possible? Correct.
I don't think we could handle all 15 of them because we're not asking for that many more slips.
Right.
But between Northwest Explorations and ourselves, we can't add that many boats to our fleets instantly. It takes a little time to do it.
Right. Okay. Well, thank you for that.
Well, it sounds like there's some opportunity if individuals, if people are really put in a bind, they're going to be for reasons of complications that moving to Blaine or other arrangements are just exceptionally burdensome. It sounds like we have some options and some wiggle room, both in the total number of slips that are requested and the offer from some of those companies to work with those individuals. So it sounds like we've got enough flexibility in there that we're not going to be pushing anyone to the curb.
Yeah, and I appreciate the opportunity from the companies that it's just not untie your boat and go move somewhere. Sometimes you got a lot of stuff that goes with you. I'll collect stuff. Sometimes there's things going on in people's lives. It takes a long. I just want to make sure that we make this transition for people as painless as possible. There's going to be some pain involved no matter what, but I want everybody to show a little compassion and move through things as as painlessly as possible for the people that have to move.
Yeah, appreciate that. Thank you. Commissioner Bell, do you have any questions, comments?
No, I just want to say thanks to Mike. That's a generous offer. So thank you very much for helping us.
Yeah, I think this is, we've had a really high amount of public participation and comment and collaboration on this pretty tricky ball of colliding circumstances. This was took a lot of creativity and I think openness to think about different solutions, and both from the members of the public who have helped us get there and with our staff. I think it's been a good job with a complex problem.
Thank you to all.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Commissioners, do we want to take formal action here on this? I think it's getting time to. We've been tossing this one around for a couple meetings now. The port isn't realizing any revenue on a majority of these slips. I think we're down probably $15,000 a month in revenue just from these slips alone. So can I ask for a motion along the lines of that we're going to allow the merchant leaseholders to expand into these areas? The port can use those slips in the short term to make changes from the berth change request list, and we will accommodate the existing Belhaven tenants that are left there through, say, the end of January.
I would make a motion to the effect of what Rob just spoke to, our executive director.
I'll second that.
Okay, and I'll open up for comment on that. I'll start with a question. Alan, do you think any of those external Seattle companies or companies from elsewhere are enough viable leads for us to hold off, or do you think it's prudent for us to just move forward here?
I think it's prudent for us to move forward on this. We reached out to 10 different companies, and only one of them even indicated an interest in not berth, but additional information. They never gave a berth count. I don't think the current demand that's being requested by the existing merchant leaseholders will take up all 40 berths. So that should still leave us a surplus that we can utilize to continue attracting new charter brokerage companies to the area if there's an interest.
Okay, very good. Any other discussion?
I have none.
I have none. Ready for a vote.
Okay.
Call for the question.
All right. I don't have any either. So let's see. Rob, would you be willing to restate that as a motion for us?
Sure, I'll do my best here. A motion from the commission authorizing port staff to expand these mortgage slips for the existing merchant leaseholders who've requested it, and take the remaining slips and distribute them among the berth change request list to the extent that there's availability, all while keeping the existing Belhaven customers that remain in their slips in those slips through the end of January, where they will then have the opportunity to go to Blaine.
Okay. All right, Commissioner Briscoe,
Yes.
Commissioner Bell,
Yes.
and I'm a yes as well. Glad to see this moving forward. Thank you.
And
Thank you,
Commissioner,
Commissioners.
we'll make sure to check back in with you as we sort through some of this, just to tell you how it's going.
Okay, very good. All right. At this point in the meeting, I'm going to recess the public meeting and open a public hearing on the 2021 strategic budget. And Tamara Subject is up. You're on deck here.
Thanks, Commissioner. Tamara Sobczak, CFO, Port of Bellingham. Before you open it up for public hearing, I'd like to just point out the differences between what we're asking the Commission to approve later in the meeting and what's published on our website. Last week, we talked about the two major changes. It was the pavilion funding and the county CARES grant funding. And then the only other change is the property tax amount. That changed slightly because we received earlier information from the county than we generally do. So the final budget will have the accurate property tax dollar amounts. And those are the only changes. So if you'd like to take public comment, that would be great.
Okay.
That's right. One thing, Mike, that property tax wasn't increased. We're still at zero on, it's just a different number as a total, correct?
That's right. And actually, it went down a little bit. The dollar amount went down a little bit because the new construction wasn't as high as I anticipated. So,
Good. Thank you.
yep.
Okay. Is there any public comment on this topic? You can unmute yourself or raise your hand or.
Commissioner Shepard?
Yes, Mr. Kyle.
Yes, I have a comment about the process here. The staff always does a great job with this huge document, and we have no issues with the content. However, I tried to access the document through the website, through the agenda. I've had trouble in the past years, but I've always been able to get there. This time I failed. At one point I got an error statement, and I don't know why. So I put some better minds to work to had a couple other people try, and they failed to access a document online. So we can get the information. That's not a problem. We're confident it's a good draft, but it seems like it should be easily accessible by the public. And in this case, we don't think that it was.
Okay, thank you for that, Jim. We'll look into that. I've obviously have really easy access to it, so I didn't realize that was a problem, but we want to be transparent with our budget, so we'll make sure it's front and center on our website.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kyle. Appreciate that. Anyone else have any input? Okay. All right. Is there any questions or comments from my fellow commissioners?
I have none.
I have none.
All right. Okay, at this time, I'm going to, Tamara, did you have anything else for us before we move on?
No, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for your presentation. We are going to now close the public hearing on the 2021 strategic budget and open a public hearing on the comprehensive scheme of harbor improvements to include the 2021 5-year capital project budget forecast and unfunded projects list. And we have Greg McHenry.
Good evening, Commissioners. Greg McHenry, Senior Planning Analyst for the Port of Bellingham. I'm going to share my screen. Can you all see that all right?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Let's see now. Can I activate my screen? Excuse me, just one moment. Here we go. As you know, the Port of Bellingham can design and engineer projects all they want, but before they go and construct them, they have to hold a public hearing, and that project has to be a part of the comprehensive scheme of harbor improvements. So essentially, our comprehensive scheme of harbor improvements is an improvement plan. And this public hearing is an opportunity to align our strategic budget with our comprehensive scheme of harbor improvements, and is an opportunity for the public to make any objections known to the incorporation of the 5-year capital project forecast and any of the projects on the unfunded list. And the new capital projects are defined as expenditures of more than $5,000 in costs and have a useful life longer than 1 year, and can also be maintenance and repair projects or expenditures of more than $10,000, which increase the useful life of an asset. And we have links to those forecasts if anybody wants to see those, and the unfunded projects list, and all the information is available on our website. There will be no action taken tonight on after the public hearing. Action is anticipated after a 14-day SEPA comment period, and that's actually tentatively scheduled for the next commission meeting on December 8th. So if there's any member of the public that would like to comment on this action, that'd be great.
All right. Anyone wanting to provide public comment, you can unmute yourself or raise your hand. Okay, hearing none. Any questions or comments from my fellow commissioners?
I have none.
And I have none.
All right. I don't have any either. Any other comments from you, Greg?
No, just that the final documents would be the ones from the final approved budget after that action is taken.
Okay. Mm-hmm. All right. Well, all those resources are available, and we will look to see this on our agenda again at the next meeting.
Thank you.
Commissioners,
all right.
Commissioner,
yes.
before we go to approve the budget, if I could just take a moment to share my screen and show folks where the budget is located on the Port's website. We will also, we'll get this more prominently displayed. But if you go to portofbellingham.com, let's see here. Let me see here, get this shared. And you go to About Us, and you go to Financial Information. You'll see that the Port has released its draft 2021 strategic budget. If you click on that link, it should take you right into our budget. So again, it's under About Us, Financial Information, and then 2021 draft strategic budget. And my apologies, it wasn't more prevalent. Again, we'll put this more front and center.
Okay. Very good. Thank you. All right. With that, I'm going to close the public hearing on the comprehensive scheme of harbor improvements to include the 2021 5-year capital project budget forecast and unfunded projects list, and reconvene the regular commission meeting. We are now on to our action items, and our first action item, we get to have Tamara Sobczak once again.
Do we get a joke this time, though? Come on.
You didn't like my last joke. Tamara Sobczak, CFO, Port of Bellingham. So this action is the final topper to our budget process. There's 2 resolutions required. The first one adopts the budget and mentions the tax levy. And the second one authorizes the tax levy and also declares a need to maintain our banked capacity, basically preserves our right to it in the future if we need it. And those 2 resolutions are required to file the budget with the county. That's it.
Okay, we've discussed this at previous meetings. Do we have any questions or comments? Commissioner Briscoe?
I have none.
And Commissioner Bell?
Let's go.
All right. Okay, Carrie, if you please.
Port Commission approval of resolution number 1394 approving the 2021 strategic budget and resolution number 1395 authorizing the regular property tax levy and declaring a substantial need to maintain the maximum levy capacity.
Okay, Commissioner Bell.
Yes.
Commissioner Briscoe.
Yes.
Commissioner Shepard is yes as well. Carries 3-0.
Thank you.
All right, our second action item is Mr. Gowron.
Right, good afternoon, Commissioners. Brian Gowron, Director of Environmental and Planning Services. I'm just going to share my screen here as well. See if just bear with me for a moment. All right, can you see this presentation?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Yeah, this action item, along with the next agenda item, are both related to the Harris Avenue Shipyard Environmental Cleanup Project in Fairhaven. It's a project we've been working on with our project partners in the Department of Ecology for a number of years under the Model Toxics Control Act, or MODCA, which is the State Environmental Cleanup Project or regulation. I've combined this presentation, just a few slides to go through, it covers both of the action items. And then when I get through that, we also have available for any questions or clarifying questions, Holly Stafford from Schmelik, Sicken and Davis, as well as Tim Gallagher with Gallagher Law Group, who was the mediator between the port, Univar, and their historic insurance carriers for this proposed action item. So I've briefed the commission, or the staff has briefed the commission a number of times on this project. You're fairly familiar with it, but just for a little bit of background and context, the Harris Avenue Shipyard MODCA cleanup site is located in Fairhaven at the end of Harris Avenue, kind of shown on that aerial photo in the red box. It's about 10 acres in size, 5 acres upland, and about 5 acres of aquatic land. It's a combination of property that's owned by the port as well as state-owned land that's managed by the port under a port management agreement with the Department of Natural Resources. It's had over 100 years of use as a commercial and industrial activities, fish processing, shipbuilding, repair, boat repair. There have been a number of dry docks that were located at the site, and it has a existing marine railway system as well that's been a big asset for that facility. As you know, currently, unfortunately, the site's vacant, but we have been working to keep some interim uses with the pier, some lay berthing of vessels, and then, of course, our real estate division is actively marketing the property for other marine trades tenants that could potentially occupy that site. Having over 100 years of industrial practices on the waterfront, it's no surprise there are some contaminant impacts to the site. They're fairly typical to what you see at boatyards and shipyards around the Pacific Northwest. Metals, primarily arsenic, copper, and zinc from bottom paint, sandblasting, grinding, all of the repair and shipbuilding components that go into those activities. There's petroleum hydrocarbons in soil and groundwater from fueling, machining, and engine maintenance, that type of operation. And then we have some other contaminants like semi-volatile organic compounds and PAHs and PCBs also present in sediments. There's been a lot of work that's been done on the site to date. The port, going back to 1998, it had some initial investigations where we initially discovered contaminants. We worked with the Department of Ecology in 2003 to get under an agreed order to do a sediment-specific remedial investigation and feasibility study, or RIFS. That was expanded in 2010 under a new agreed order to do a site-wide upland and sediment RIFS. We amended that agreed order in 2016 in order to complete an interim action, which is a cleanup of a portion of the site prior to the completion of the site-wide determination by the Department of Ecology. And we did that construction in 2017 and 2018. Then last year, the site-wide RIFS was finalized following a public process and public comment period that was led by the Department of Ecology, and the RIFS was finalized. And then this year, we've been working closely with Ecology as they develop the cleanup action plan, which is the ecology's decision document on what the final cleanup for the site would be. So Univar is a private company that has a long history of operations at the site. Back to 1915 through the 60s, Pacific American Fisheries was an owner and operator at this facility for managing and building and maintaining their fishing fleet. There was some fish processing and other activities that went on. In 1967, Pacific American Fisheries merged with one of Univar's as a private company, one of their predecessors. And then in 2009, the Department of Ecology, based on some of the work that had been going on previously on the port work, issued Univar a potentially liable party notification, which indicated that Ecology determined that their previous activities contributed to site contamination and they were responsible for some of that. And since we'd already been underway with a lot of work, we reached out to Univar and worked really cooperatively to develop a funding agreement between the port and Univar in 2013 to finalize and finish the RIFS work. And now that we have gotten to that point and we have a draft cleanup action plan that's under development, this year we've been working under a mediation process to develop a site-wide settlement for their contribution to this cleanup project. And just to give a little bit of context here for what this cleanup will look like and what some of the work we've already done, just got a couple slides here. The interim action was a large project, actually. We completed that in 2017 and 18. It addressed overall about a third of the site itself. We excavated and removed about 1,200 cubic yards of contaminated soil. We dredged and disposed of just about 10,000 cubic yards of contaminated sediment. Removed a large overwater structure called the Carpenter Building and associated wooden pier that was a large overwater coverage. Following removal of those, we took out over 500 creosote treated pilings from the aquatic environment and then replaced the wooden portion of the pier that had been removed with a newly constructed concrete pier with different types of materials like steel pilings. And that was the interim action. This figure here shows from the draft cleanup action plan what Ecology's selected cleanup will include. And it includes rolling the interim action work into it, which are shown here in these kind of cross-hatched areas. That's about a third of the site that we completed as part of the interim action. The remaining portions of the site will include shallow soil excavation in the light tan areas where there's probably 2 to 4 feet of excavation in those areas. Some deeper excavation of soils in an area where we've identified contaminants at a greater depth. Then moving out into the in-water portion would be a full dredging, just like the remaining portion of the interim action, dredging the green areas to a clean bottom. And then in areas that we can't access that with mechanical dredging because of those existing structures, there'd be some capping underneath existing piers over here and in this area. There'd be some excavation and capping of the intertidal area in light blue. And then lastly, the purple stripe is the marine railway system. And one of our primary goals is to make sure that maintains its functionality. It's an asset to the site. And so there'll be some focused excavation around that railway and then some subsequent capping on that area as well. But it will maintain its functionality. So with those in mind, the proposed settlement that's the action item that's before you right now, it involves the overall cleanup, which rolls the interim action, which is about a $14.1 million project. That was all incurred by the port. That was not covered under our cost share agreement with Univar. That was just for the RIFS work. And then the future estimated cost is about $16.7 million. So all rolled up, that's about a $30.8 million project. Through our mediation process, the port, Univar, their historic insurance carriers worked on a settlement, worked really cooperatively, and the proposed settlement that's this action item includes a payment to the port of just over $12 million. The port would release Univar and the carriers from any future claims, and the port would take on the responsibility of implementing the site cleanup, including the risk of any cost overages, permitting delays, and project changes that would have come through that. We feel like this is a project that it allows us to move forward on a high priority Bellingham Bay cleanup project, and staff does recommend approval. But with that, I'd be happy to address any questions you might have, and Holly and Tim would be available as well.
Well, very good. Thank you, Brian. And I agree, it's a high priority for us. We have a number of cleanup sites that we're working on, and this is certainly one of the important ones. I don't know if this is really a question for you or for Holly, but it's my understanding that our goal is to get 50% of the costs brought to the table by those individuals who have been identified as responsible for contributing to the solution. And while I recognize you guys have done good work and you've brought some real money to the table here, it's certainly shy of that mark that we're looking toward. And I'm looking for a little bit of explanation and rationale. And it's not an arbitrary number. We didn't just pick 50% out of the hat because it sounds good. I think what comes through with your presentation is just the volume of staff time that goes into these projects, not only on the Port of Bellingham side, but also with the Department of Ecology. That's all public money that's already being expended. We're also looking at the 50% match that is going to happen. Again, that money administered through the Department of Ecology, again, through the goodwill of the people of Washington State and the people of Whatcom County. And this is still going to leave us over $3 million of shortfall that we as the port have to pick up. And so I think we have to be really careful here because we know this MOTCA money is in really high demand. It is hard to get that money. And there are a lot of other players around the state that are jostling and elbowing in to get that money. And on top of that, we're in a pandemic where our budgets are already getting hit. And now we have to find over $3 million to support the rest of this cleanup. So I'm hoping you or Holly could have a little bit of comment for me.
I'm happy to. I'm happy to jump in, if that's all right with you, Brian. Right. So Commissioner Shepard, you make an excellent point. That is typically the model that the port works from. In this circumstance, the $12 million settlement is approximately 39% of the total project costs. When we being legal, working with staff, are evaluating whether a potential settlement is one that we should recommend to the commission, we consider what a court is likely to do if we litigate the matter. So we look at the alternatives. And here's this particular settlement versus what would a court likely do, knowing that for MOTCA matters, the court is going to be making considerations and decisions based in equity. So with that in mind, there are three factors that distinguish the Harris Avenue shipyard site from the port's other sites. The first one is that the Univar is a successor in interest to the company that operated at the site. As Brian mentioned, we go back to 1915, 1916 to PAF, and there were no fewer than almost a dozen, I'd say, name changes and mergers between PAF to where we get to Univar today. So we believe that's something that the court would take into consideration in terms of the fairness of Univar's overall share.
Because this is technical, can you just explain what that means, the successor?
Oh, absolutely. So Univar is a successor. It's essentially, you've had a number of companies that have combined together over the years. And right now, the result of that is Univar. I think even a few years ago, they had a slightly different name. But it's different companies that have come together. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to find PAF, who was on the site over 100 years ago, today. That company does not exist, but it exists in some corporate form in the form of Univar. So the second consideration that we were looking at here is that the overall time on the risk of the contamination. So again, Univar was on the earlier side of this. Univar's predecessor, PAF, was on the earlier side. Its liability stopped in 1966 when it transferred the property, the upland property, to the port. And the port's use is more recent. So we look at that in a bit of a weighted way in terms of what contamination is likely impacting the site today. The second piece of that time on the risk is we had gone into the negotiations with a certain time frame allocated to Univar for the different constituents of concern. So we looked at it and said, from 1916 to 1994, That's when Univar was on the site, Univar's predecessor, and that's when metals and PAHs, et cetera, were being released. The second group were the PCBs from 1935 to 1994. In going through the mediation process, we were considering Univar's arguments that essentially cut Univar's time on the site shorter, so it made it more recent for both of those groups of constituents, and then extended the port's potential liability on the other side. So we shortened Univar and extended the port out to 2009. And that was based on some pretty convincing arguments that Univar had regarding a quiet period of shipbuilding on the site. So even though they were there from 1916, things weren't really going from 1916 to say about 1937 or so. And again, these are things in the back of our minds. What would a court do with this if we were to go to court? So it resulted in a heavier weight to the port's share. And then the third consideration here is a concept known as orphan shares. So what we typically do when we go into these negotiations is we say we'll put a 20% share of liability on the owner side of things, an 80% share on the operator, roughly speaking. And we fold the port's expectations of 50% grant funding in there. And we look at this and we say, well, the port never operated at the site. So the port is only looking at that owner share. But this particular site has a very long period of time of former operators that leased property from the port that are no longer in existence. So their share is what's called an orphan share. And that's about 1/3 of the liability, a liability for the entire site based on the amount of time the port has leased the property to different users. And again, going back to Commissioner Bell's question about that successor and interest, it's a different situation. We're talking about companies that no longer exist. So they didn't merge with other companies. There were no name changes. They just dissolved and are no longer around. So what courts do in that situation is they have their discretion to use equitable factors to determine who pays for that orphan share. Whose side of the ledger does that fall on, the owners or the operators? And there's actually a fairly recent case, 2018, that looked at Matka, and the court there analyzed a number of factors, including, well, what party derived benefit from the contamination, and what party is going to benefit from the cleanup? How long have has the property been owned by one liable party versus the other? And sort of those sorts of things. So looking at that type of equity and equitable rationale, it was our opinion that the $12 million settlement was a reasonable one in light of all of these factors that a court would likely consider if we were to say, no, not enough, we want 50%. And we were going to have a fight over it.
Okay.
Right.
Thanks for that answer, Holly. Appreciate it.
Sure. And so, I apologize if I may. The other piece of this that you guys just saw Tim Gallagher, our mediator, raise his hand as well. The other piece of this is that, if we were to litigate, it's possible that we could, end up above 50%. But the other thing that we have to consider is the legal fees that would go into having that fight, the staff time for that litigation when staff has other priorities in terms of the cleanups that they're actually working on to perform, and the time-consuming nature of this work. We would be talking somewhere in the range of probably 3 to 4 years, whereas one of the other action items that Brian mentioned is an agreed order that would finalize the cleanup action plan, and that starts the clock running with regard to ecology deadlines to perform the cleanup. So in that circumstance, even if we were successful to get more than 50% on the litigation, the cleanup would likely get ahead of the funding.
Thanks, Holly. Mr. Gallagher, did you want to weigh in for us?
Just briefly, the equitable factors, just a higher degree of uncertainty. There was a significant orphan share here, meaning former operators that are no longer present or financially viable, that were tenants of the port, which is about 1/3 of the liability. So how's a court going to allocate that? Because, you were the owner, you're the one that had a lease with these people. Are they going to put really on Univar? So the big issue here, in my opinion, was this orphan share issue, because there's a lot of history here. So it's not a simple math, a lot of uncertainty, and that's just the only point I wanted to emphasize, Commissioner.
Thank you.
There's no opportunity for us to go back against any of those orphan companies and determine if they had insurance during those days?
We have done all of the work that we can do going through the port's historical documents. As the commissioners may recall, that's one of my favorite tasks to do for the port, is to go back through old files that have been forgotten about and find certificates of insurance that name the port as an additional insured. But we have not found anything here that we've been able to trigger.
And for the record, we just heard an attorney talking about not getting more attorney's fees. That might be an aberration.
All right. Yes, the commissioners, any other questions on this one?
I support.
More a statement than a question, I guess. I certainly want this. I understand the uncertainty. That's a big word. It can be divided up in many ways, and it can be used in many ways. And I'm not particularly happy with what's gone on, but at this point, I guess it's what it is. Certainly, hope no one thinks that we're setting some kind of precedent here to take less than 50%, because that's not where I want to be. I'm dealing with not my money, public money. I've got to answer to the people for $3 million why we're paying $3 million. And I guess the only answer I've been given is uncertainty. So I guess into the future, I might have to work harder to find out what the uncertainty is, because I certainly don't like the uncertainty. But that's all I have to say.
And may I respond, or?
Yes, please.
Yeah, thank you. Look, the problem is we have a lot of people, operators that are not here, that are gone, that were your tenants, and it is frustrating because those tenants, if we could find their insurance, we could maybe find some assets. But I've been through that exercise in various ports. I know Holly has, and worked with Holly and Frank before. So that's what's frustrating here. That at the end of the day, we're left holding the bag on $3 million, and it's not small money. But I can say, I know the insurers, the historical insurers, they were looking at $11 million deal. So we didn't leave any money on the table with our $12,013,472 settlement. So we didn't leave anything on the table. I know that's not going to make you feel better, but I just wanted to make that comment.
Thank you.
Yeah, appreciate that. That helps. Commissioner Briscoe, any follow-up there?
No, I have nothing further. Thank you.
Brian, just one last question. I just want to make sure that we're clear on this last point, and that's about the cost overruns. We're essentially giving a free and clear card here, a pass for no future. We can't go back to Univar for any future claims, and that puts us in a position of some risk with unknowns if there are cost overruns, unknowns if we find something we don't expect to find. How comfortable are you with still recommending us to proceed given that risk there?
Yeah, that's a great question, Commissioner. And, we did build a contingency into the cost estimates, and that was built into the negotiation. So we do both or all the parties recognize that there's risk being taken. The port is taking on the majority of the risk, like you said, in the sense that, we are not planning on coming back to any negotiations if cost overruns happen or permitting delays happen. I think with the caveat, and Holly, correct me if I'm wrong here, is that if Ecology has a reopener for something new or was unforeseen or we did not know of, that Ecology comes back with new reopeners once we enter into a consent decree, that might be a different scenario. But that's very unlikely to happen. I don't think it's ever happened in Washington State. And so we would be taking that on. The good thing is we have, in my opinion, we have a lot of experience on these projects. We have our engineering staff is going to be working really closely in the design and engineering components, which is the next action item. And I think that the contingency we've built into this, it takes some of that risk into consideration. And we will, of course, be looking for any cost savings that we can as we move forward on implementation. But, that's the reality of these projects. We'll be working closely with the Department of Ecology on the grant funding components as well.
And if I can just jump in a little bit, this site is also a little bit different because it had such a robust interim action conducted on it in such a recent time frame to the current date. The cost modeling for the remainder of the cleanup is based upon the cost of that interim action. As Brian said, it was about 1/3 of the physical size of the site, but really it was about $14 million out of our $30.8 million estimated amount. So staff has a pretty good certainty in terms of what the costs are likely to be going forward. And also I did want to note that Commissioner Briscoe, that your note about the 50% concerns has been noted by legal.
Thank you.
I echo both my fellow commissioners' concerns on those topics, and I also know that the cost of time and money is substantial. So we're basically settling this year for costs that we're going to incur down the road, and we're taking the burden of inflation. And I also know remedial actions don't typically tend to go the way they're planned, especially something of this size. So I'm reluctant. I just think a judge might do something different. Just saying.
Okay.
I have to hold my nose.
All right, well, thanks, commissioners. Appreciate your feedback and the discussion. And do you have any other questions?
No,
Carrie, I think.
And all the money up front. We've already got 14 million in this, right?
Yeah, that's right. That's correct, Commissioner.
Okay. Commissioner Bell, did you have anything further?
No, I'm good.
Okay. Commissioner Briscoe, any further questions or comments?
No, I have none.
All right. Brian, anything else from you here? Or any of
Yes, sir.
Okay. Carrie, would you please read the motion?
Approve a motion authorizing the executive director to execute a release and settlement agreement with Univar Solutions USA, Inc. and the corresponding representation and warranty agreement with Univar's historical insurance carriers for remediation costs at the Harris Avenue Shipyard cleanup site.
Okay. Commissioner Briscoe.
Boy, I tell you, I really have second thoughts about this. But, it just really bothers me. I think this is going to bite us really bad here. The way things are going, the cost of things and everything else to get this thing done, I think we're going to come out really on a real short stick on this deal. I'm not very happy with it, but yes.
Commissioner Bell.
I think I'm more worried about MOTCA funds. I mean, given the current pandemic and what we're looking at, I'm worried that MOTCA is not going to be there for us. In which case, we're going back to the taxpayer of Whatcom County to get fund this thing. And I do see MOTCA being threatened. down the road. I do, however, Holly, I trust you and I trust Frank and John, in your powers. So I thank you for that, and I will listen to as a businessman, I've often been told to listen to my attorneys. So I will listen to my attorneys and say yes.
Okay. And I think you've heard loud and clear from the commission about our concerns here, our concerns for precedent and our expectations for the future deals. We have a lot of cleanups in Bellingham Bay. We have a lot of responsibility to the public, to the future citizens of this community, and it comes with a lot of costs. And so we are looking to our staff and our legal departments to help us get there and to be able to do so sustainably today and in the future. So I think you've heard loud and clear from us. We do see the importance of this, and I also vote yes because I want to see this move forward.
Hey, Brian, can you real quick tell me, have you seen a threat to the MOTCA funding at the state level?
Not directly just yet, but that's every time, we hear about the pandemic, then additionally, with Governor Inslee's recent commitment to commit more funds to offset the COVID impacts, my first thought went to, well, where is their money in the budget? And MOTCA is one of those funds that always gets, I think depending on what happens with the federal packages of relief, that might impact that. But no, I haven't seen anything directly yet, but it's always on the table. The governor's budget was just submitted. It does have Port of Bellingham projects in there based on their forecast, but once the legislature gets a hold of the budget, it gets just reworked. And so we're keeping a close eye on that. And the approach that we take on these though right now is, as for the next action item, is that's why we're entering into these smaller bites of project to do engineering design next. Then we'll see about funding before we commit to a larger construction project, and we'll see about funding before we, enter into a consent decree. But it's always at risk, unfortunately. But we try to manage that, working closely with ecology and the legislature.
Well, and it is the last thing that anybody wants to spend money on because it doesn't return revenue necessarily to the state. Okay, thanks.
Great, thank you.
Okay. Brian, you are up for our next action item as well, number 3. And I think we have time to get through this before we take a quick break and have public comment.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioners. This will be a really quick one. Like I said, I rolled these 2 projects into the previous presentation. So really, with that the previous action item approved, this next step is entering into an agreed order with the Department of Ecology for the next phase of cleanup work. The agreed order includes the draft cleanup action plan, and Department of Ecology is preparing to issue the agreed order and the draft cleanup action plan for public review and comment next month. And following that process, pending any changes based on public comment, pending commission approval of this action, we would be agreeing to enter into the next phase of work, which would be engineering, design, and permitting, and getting the project shovel ready for construction. Based on the work we've done to date and where the project is in the process right now, and then the previous action item, again, staff recommends approval. And then once we go through the public comment process, pending no substantive changes, we'd enter into that agreed order. So if you have any questions on that, I didn't have any other presentation components for this one.
Okay, any question?
I have some timeline questions here for you, Brian, so it's clear in my head. It gets kind of foggy sometimes. We entered into the agreed order. How long from that time before we would start cleanup, the actual physical part?
Yeah, there's a schedule of deliverables that's associated with the work. So some of it's pending on permitting. Permitting is a big component of that. We try to figure that as best as we could. It's usually about an 18-month permitting period. So we would anticipate it's about a year-long design process. Once we enter into this agreed order, we would hire the design consultants to do the engineering, design, and permitting. And that's about a year and a half process, pending, not commission, but the permitting process. And once we get those permits in hand, we'd be able to start construction right away. A lot of that would go also, though, we want to work closely with any potential tenants that we have and the real estate division to make sure that our designs are compatible with either future tenants or incoming tenants, and that we're working closely with them. So it's probably an 18-month minimum, an 18-month process to a year or to a couple of years before we're actually in the water doing construction.
And to the mock-up side of this, at what point are we guaranteed? How long, timeline-wise, would we till we're guaranteed we have the mock-up funding portion of this?
We do have a good chunk of the MACA funding under an existing grant agreement right now. We definitely have the funding to do the engineering and design work. We have a good chunk of that funding. I don't have the number off the top of my head. I should for the construction. But the way we would stage this is to get it shovel ready, negotiate a consent decree, but not enter into that consent decree until we have the project funded from the Department of Ecology. And they've worked with us on that. They're on board with that concept. That's how we did Blaine Marina, for example. And so that's the process that we go under. So we're not underway with a construction project and we don't have grant funds in hand.
All right, Des, I don't want to get the locomotive going downhill here and all of a sudden there's no bridge in between the next canyon and the one past it, and we're trying to figure out how to put the band in over it.
Right.
So, okay, very good. Thank you, Brian.
All right, Commissioner Bell, any questions, comments?
I'm trying to just figure out what that analogy was that Bobby just laid out in front of me. I'm trying to visualize that.
That's a locomotive going downhill with no bridge to get across the canyon.
Got it. Just put the image in my head.
I just want to say thank you and appreciate the opportunity. Look, I think you made the right decision. That's not going to make you feel better, but I just want to say thank you, and that's it.
Well, thanks for coming.
Yeah.
I appreciate it.
Thank you, Tim.
Thank you,
And
Tim.
it's good to hear that people have compassion in the colliding circumstances that we're all going through, picking up on a few words that you said early, and that you give a shit about somebody who's living on a boat and has nowhere to go. And to me, that's impressive. So at least there's compassion left somewhere, right? So
Thank you.
good to hear. Thanks, folks. All right,
Thanks.
appreciate it.
There's compassion with Bobby.
All right, I'll go.
That's okay. I got enough to go around.
That category.
Brian, I'm just wondering if, I don't have a good handle on when somebody asks me how many cleanups we're doing, how many cleanups are upcoming, how many cleanups we've already done, and the amount of money that's been spent on those. It would be really nice to have a document that laid that out. If you and your team could work on putting that together, that just shows both the public investment from the state of Washington through MOTCA, through the Port of Bellingham, and the money that we've been able to bring in. I think those tangible examples are really useful when we go to Olympia, even if it's virtual this year. When we meet with our legislators to make sure that they can really visualize the impact of these MOTCA funds and the work that we're doing, and for the public to know, because Bellingham Bay it's got a lot of cleanups, and we've been involved in and are involved in a really substantial effort that's bearing productive fruit in cleaning up this environment. And it's no small task, and I just want to make sure that we're able to clearly communicate to the public the level of action and commitment and investment that we're taking.
Yeah, that's a great comment, and we'd be happy to do that. We have a lot of that information. We haven't compiled that recently, but it's actually a good reminder that we should be pulling that together. And I would add on to that, though, that we also have a plan, not just looking backwards, but as Rob's mentioned a couple times, we need to be looking forward into what these budget impacts are for these projects. So we're looking at that as comprehensively, and we're going to lean into that early next year. And we'll add this component to it to look backwards and say, so what have we got accomplished with this? And this is why we do these projects. But here's what we have on the horizon. And we need to know that there are big chunks that are not fully funded yet. And so we're looking at all these different avenues, including grant funding, including other settlements like the one we just discussed, And then when whatever is left over, we're going to need to be talking about from a port budget as well, or some other funding mechanism. So yeah, there's a lot to these projects, and our team will lean into that.
Thank you.
You know, I just to what you said, Michael, about there, Commissioner Shepherd, about our bay and its importance and what we've done. I've been on the waterfront my entire life, which is more years than I care to tell everybody. But the last week I've been in the harbor in Squalicum in particular, and I've been down there at night when we've got lights going and you get a glow in the water and you can see down a ways. And I cannot remember the last time in our harbor with those lights on at night that I could see as far down in the water and down the piling as I can now. I stopped and I looked because it was like, whoa, that's I haven't seen it that clean ever. I mean, I shouldn't say ever, for a long time. So these cleanups and the things that everyone has done, not just the Port of Bellingham, but the residents around the bay, have really made a difference, as well as the residents upriver. We're seeing less and less stuff coming down there. So every little bit we can do makes a huge difference, but it is hugely costly.
And that's important. Those are important anecdotal information, and that translates into long-term goals of having a fishing season back locally in Bellingham Bay and keeping the productive fishing and crabbing that already goes on. And oftentimes when we make these cleanups, that connects to our capacity to redevelop land and put that into productive use, whether that's at GP or that's in Blaine or elsewhere. And so there are some real dollars and cents outcomes that come out of that, in addition to those tangible stories that I just love hearing, like this one that Commissioner Briscoe shared.
Well, it's also, I think, important to underscore the fact that we didn't create these issues, and the longer they sit there in the water, the more damage they're going to do, and the more likelihood a release will occur. So not just kudos to this commission, but previous commissions on being proactive in this. And thanks, Brian, for your work.
Yeah, thanks, commissioners.
All right, that sounds like all of our comments and questions. Carrie, if you please with the motion.
A motion authorizing the executive director to execute an agreed order to perform remedial design for required cleanup actions at the Harris Avenue shipyard site, pending no substantive changes to the draft agreed order.
All right, Commissioner Bell?
Yes.
Commissioner Briscoe?
Yes.
And I am a yes as well, carries 3-0. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you, commissioners.
All right, I'm going to have us take a 10-minute break, come back at 5:35 for our public comment, and then we have one last action item. If anyone's planning to speak for our public comment, you can join us back then. Is there anyone here that's interested in providing public comment for us? Not hearing any. Rob, anybody signed up with you?
No, sir.
All right. Well, it is 5:35. I'm going to reconvene us after our break and make one more call for public comment. Going once, going twice, gone. Okay, we are going to finish up with our last action item, and Shirley McFerrin.
Hi there, Commissioners. For the record, Shirley McFerrin, Real Estate Director. It's nice to see all of you this evening. We have 5 slides that we'd like to go through with you today. You will hear from Terry Elahi, one of our real estate property managers for the Fairhaven Marine Industrial Park. You will also hear from John Sitkin, our legal counsel, who has helped us along the way on crafting this proposed deal for your consideration. So with your approval, this is a proposed non-binding letter of intent that sets forth the deal points of a proposed purchase and sale agreement between Dominion Development Company, which is owned by David and Bonnie Ebenall. If you approve the letter of intent, we would move to a purchase and sale agreement, and we would have 120 days to negotiate that purchase and sale agreement, and staff would come back to the commission for your approval on that purchase and sale agreement. And the purchase and sale agreement consists of a property swap and some cash from the port. So the port owns this Fairhaven Marine Industrial Park property. You can see the area that is about 60 by 386. It's shaded in red. And then up on the bluff, there is a triangle piece that is also owned by the Port of Bellingham. The Fairhaven property is subject to a rezone of a portion of the port's Fairhaven Marine Industrial Park. If the Port Commission approves the next step, we would ask you to authorize the Executive Director to sign a City of Bellingham docket supporting the rezone of the Fairhaven Marine Industrial Park. And that document is due no later than tomorrow, so that it could be added to the Planning Commission packet for their November 19th meeting if you wanted to proceed today. So that covers our Fairhaven Marine Industrial Park. And what the property swap would mean to the port is that we would give Dominion the property at the Fairhaven Marine Industrial Park in exchange for the Ebenall property at C Street, which we are a huge landholder at C Street. These are our marine trades properties, water-oriented properties. We think, staff thinks, it is certainly something that we ought to explore, and if the commission is willing, move to a purchase and sale agreement. If a rezone is approved by the City of Bellingham, Dominion would construct a mixed-use project at Fairhaven, which must include a parking garage on the Fairhaven site for not less than 30 public parking stalls. So from staff's view, the commission could potentially help solve Fairhaven's parking problem and add to your water-reliant marine trades real estate portfolio. So the port would exchange the Fairhaven Marine Industrial Park property plus give Dominion $350,000 cash for the Evanol C Street property. So we'll move to the next slide.
Thank you, Shirley. Good afternoon, Commissioners. Terry Leahy, Senior Property Manager. Just a bit of the financials impacts for this transaction. In 2018, Evanol had its property appraised for, and it came in at 1.3 million. Earlier this year, port staff did its own analysis of the property, and we believe to be the value to be in the range of between 730 and 860, an average of 790,000. The port had its Fairhaven property appraised in 2019, which came in at 417,000. And then we did a negotiated cash amount of 350,000, bringing the total cost to the port for this property would be 767,000. We're looking at getting a potential income from the property of 47,000 a year, which puts our return at about 6.2%. I'll move on to the next slide, and hopefully Mr. Sitkin.
Thank you, Commissioners. In essence, this is a non-binding letter of intent that we would have 4 months to negotiate the definitive purchase and sale agreement. The 4 months is given consideration of the holidays. We'll probably lose, we figure, 30 to 45 days plus delays associated with COVID and just trying to transact a negotiated process. Key for the Evanol project or the Dominion project is a rezone for the uses they seek, and the issue for our position was that we did not want to give up the industrial uses on that property unless Dominion would close on the property. The solution on that was, rather than rezoning the map to commercial core, we retain the industrial zoning and add the commercial core uses to this site. We further, I would say, as you see in the slide, we have a 90-day due diligence period after the execution. But back to the commercial core zoning component of that is that we have a restrictive covenant restricting the uses on the property to those allowed as industrial 2 zone uses and not the commercial core uses until the city issues a certificate of occupancy for the parking garage with 30 paid public parking spaces. That's our assurance that you get the parking. That was one of the other issues we had to work through, and Shirley did a great job of working all these nuances through with our other partner in this deal, is trying to get to how do we protect what our interests were, which is retain the industrial zoning if it doesn't close, and how do we assure post-closing the parking spaces are provided. So that's how we work through this, a post-closing covenant, and then restrict the uses odds to industrial 2. If the city or the planning commission or Evanol change their positions on the uses that might be allowed, we would have the opportunity and right to withdraw the rezone authorization, and we've confirmed that with city staff, both the Director Fix and myself. The closing date is extended sometime. We realize it's a long closing date. It's to clear this occurs sooner of 3 years from the purchase and sale agreement or the issuance of land use entitlements and the completion of appeals there too. Now, I would tell you that Dominion's given us a timeline. They estimate building permits in January 2023 is an estimate that's depending upon appeals. Many of their approvals require city council approval, such as the rezone that they're contemplating. They also have design review that goes through the planning director with public hearings and processes. So there will be some process and some risk of appeals that they are concerned about. He wants to know that he can build the project before committing to the swap. Next slide. Access will not be allowed through the Fairhaven Marine Industrial property. That effectively limits the uses on the property. There could be storage, but he'd have to use some kind of access from above the elevators if they went through that direction. At closing, you have a swap. They will not obtain this property unless you obtain the C Street property. We call it a no-whiner clause, but they, depending on the uses, will have a no objection to the users of the abutting Fairhaven Marine Industrial property, attempting to assure their continued operation without disruption. There is a commitment to the non-binding letter of intent, so non-binding commitment at this point to allow construction access and staging at the Fairhaven Marine Industrial Property, but that would be subject to a separate lease agreement, rental payment, including leasehold excise tax. Those will all be part of the purchase and sale agreement negotiation that'll be concluded in the next 3 to 4 months. And again, that purchase and sale agreement will come back to you, the commission, for final approval. The only binding element we have in this binding letter of intent is our right to remove the authorization to proceed with the rezone, and that Rob would sign the execute the request for the rezone on that condition with your approval. And that is the action that is requested.
Okay, thank you very much. Any questions?
Do you have any questions?
Yeah, any questions or comments?
I have a real quick question about the interim period. So let's assume all the permits are issued, and then it's determined to not be economically viable.
We've set up that he's to close 30 days from the earlier of the 3 years or the issuance of all land use permits, timelines, and building permits. At that point, if he's got all the permits but decides then not to proceed, we'd say you have to close.
So assuming that, oh, okay. So he can get all the permits, and then all of a sudden the market flips and this thing doesn't become a reality. We still have the option, or we still close.
We would say at that point, you've got your proposed structures, and these are details we'd have to work out in the purchase and sale agreement, Commissioner, but you would have all the land use entitlements for this project. You would want to close at that point, and your building permits and all other approvals.
Yeah, just give me.
We're going to be further down. If he gets to the designing phase, he's got a process that he has to go to design review with the city, get that approval, and after that point, he'll start doing building plans. He'll be within a year of wanting to commence construction, probably less at that point. Once he starts going into final construction plans, he'll have a sense of that market at that point. Yeah. We could say we'll have arguments, and we can drill into this in the purchase and sale agreement. He still has to proceed in good faith with pursuing all these permits and approvals. And should he not, then we would have some other issues to address.
Yeah, but this would not be the first instance where somebody had got all the way through the permitting process and through the design. We've even seen it where they've gotten the foundation laid and then realized it wasn't going to be economically viable, or they couldn't get the financing and walk away.
Well, those are the nuances of the deals in the final purchase and sale agreement we'll look at, that before he can commence construction, he's got to close. Because to get construction, he will have completed his building permits and completed all appeals.
Yeah, I have no question.
Commissioner B, is what if he pulls a foundation permit in ahead of all the other permits and tries to start something? He doesn't have access to the site because he hasn't closed.
It's not even that. It's just that, you go to Blaine and you see that condo development up there, they got half of it done, and then they ran out, or they deemed it to be, or the 2008 recession hit, and they weren't able to complete it. So you're sitting there for, almost a decade with nothing but a foundation.
You got to be a little more positive, Commissioner Bill.
I know you've been around almost as long as I have, and you can remember the steel structure on the south side.
Right. Hey, Bobby, this is 2020.
Yeah, next year will be 2021, so we're moving right along.
All right. As long as you note my concern on that, that's really what I care about, John.
Yeah, we'll try to address that in the purchase and sale agreement. But this is that first step to understand we have the outline of the structure that the parties agree to try to get to that next phase, which is the purchase agreement.
Okay. Anything further, Commissioner Bell? All right. And Commissioner Briscoe, still no other questions or comments?
No.
And I don't have any further questions or comments either. Anything else from your team, Shirley?
No, thank you.
Okay. All right. Carrie, if you please.
Sure. Motion by the Port Commission authorizing the Executive Director Sorry, you just took down the screen. To execute the following documents and all other documents necessary to complete the transactions. Enter into a non-binding letter of intent with Dominion Sustainable Development Corporation for the acquisition of 1000 C Street in exchange for property in Fairhaven and $350,000. At a later time, a binding purchase and sale agreement will be brought to the commission for approval. Execute a City of Bellingham docket application supporting a rezone of a portion of the Port's Fairhaven property by adding commercial core zoning to existing Fairhaven Urban Village Industrial 2 zoning.
All right, thank you. Commissioner Bell?
Yeah, I'd be afraid to ask Carrie to read that again. But yes, that's a yes.
Yeah, I need to bring my glasses at the next meeting.
I know how you feel, kid.
So Commissioner Bell, was that a yes, I heard?
Yes.
All right, Commissioner Briscoe?
Yes.
And Commissioner Shepard is a no. Carries 2-1.
Thank you, commissioners.
All right, that concludes our formal business, and we are now on to other business. Rob, did you have anything else for us on other business?
Just that we're going to try and put together a joint meeting with the ports of Skagit and Anacortes to discuss the zero emissions fast foiling ferry project that we're working on with Department of Commerce. So it's just a quick update. No action will need to be taken by the commission, but we wanted to inform you of the progress on that project. I think the date we're looking for that has been circulated and is December 2nd. So if you could look for that and mark it on your calendars. Again, it'll be with the Port of Skagit and the Port of Anacortes.
Okay. And that will be a joint meeting happening on Zoom.
Yeah, Zoom or Teams or one of those.
Okay. All right. Thank you. All right. Commissioner Briscoe, any other business?
Well, I did. I spoke with our executive director about it this morning, but in all I've done today, I've seemed to have forgotten what it was. So it must not have been super important. So
I put me on the spot to remember it.
All right.
Unless Rob can remember it.
Was it about the boat in Blaine?
No, it was mentioning something that had been done by a group here, and I can't remember.
Oh yeah, the increased police presence in our harbor. Big thanks to Chief Dahl for doing that.
Right, that's it. We've, with several thefts and so on and so forth, we're trying to address, as my fellow commissioners and staff know, we're trying to address the problem. We have, it's my understanding, we have gates in design. Correct me if I'm wrong, Rob, I believe you said we've settled on one of the designs we were looking at. So that part of it is still moving forward, and we've had the courtesy of the Bellingham Police Department making extra passes through our harbor to try and stop the foul play. So thank you to the Bellingham Police Department. We appreciate that. And I believe there was one individual in particular, Rob, if you would mention his name, please.
Chief David Dahl. So yeah,
thank you very much.
No, thank you, Commissioner, for that acknowledgement. And I have looked at design. Greg Nickel and I have tossed a couple around. I think the next step is to bring you in to take a look at those designs and then finalize that and keep moving forward.
Very good. Let me know when. That's all I have, Commissioner Shepard. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Commissioner Bell, anything?
Yeah, Rob, I would just like to have you explain what you're expecting to do for the Christmas season on the port, because we usually blow it out pretty big. On the day of COVID. I've already heard this explanation, but I think, Rob, given the fact that Thanksgiving's around the corner and December's right here, to let everybody know what to expect around the holiday season from the port.
Okay, I'm not going to claim to have all the details here, so Tiffany, if you're on and want to unmute and speak up, please feel free. If not, I'll try and wade through this.
Hey, hey, Rob, I'm on the line.
There we go. It's all Tiffany.
Hi, Commissioners. Tiffany Deason, Meetings and Events. You'll recall in your update, we aren't having the typical holiday port down at the Bellingham Cruise Terminal where we do all the local performers and the gingerbread house contest and, food and all that kind of stuff. But we are decorating the cruise terminal for outside viewing. So we're turning the dome room and then that below cafe space that faces the water into a giant snow globe, fingers crossed it turns out how I imagine it. And then some lighting out in the front. We think people will be looking for outside activity and can enjoy that from the outside. And that will be December 3rd through the 26th, just after Christmas, that people can enjoy that.
Thank you, Tiffany.
Any questions? Yeah.
Commissioner Shep, I have a question for Tiffany.
Yeah, go for it.
So Tiffany, has there been any thought put into, the gingerbread house thing's a pretty big deal, has been for a long time. Has there been any thought put into allowing the kids to build them at home and then we can get pictures in and display them either to that window at the cruise terminal we're speaking to or in some manner so that the kids can still participate and we can keep that ongoing through this pandemic mess?
Yeah, thanks for asking about that. I have to tell you, I looked at the gingerbread house contest from every angle, which I think I looked at it from every angle, because this was the first job I had at the port, so it's near and dear to me. This would be my 6th year. And we talked about virtual, we talked about having people deliver them to the cruise terminal, certainly many options, and we just didn't feel like we could, quite frankly, we weren't sure that we could keep the public out of the building if the houses were physically present, because it's such a huge draw. I mean, we predict over 5,000 people in those 3 days that are in that building. And so we potentially could do a virtual one where people send in their photos. We can certainly explore that, or maybe we could do it on our social media, on our Instagram, something like that. If you'd like me to work on that a little bit, I certainly could.
I think that's a good idea.
I certainly would, Tiffany, because I think it's very important to the kids in our community. It's very important to some families that have been in it for some time. And I think it's very important to the community overall. So if there's any way at all, I know it's a big job and it's a lot to ask of you, but 'tis the season.
Yeah. Well, I mean, ask around staff. I'm constantly trying to figure out ways to throw another party. So I'll definitely work on that and see what I can come up with and get something to you in the update.
Thank you very much.
Yep. Hey, and I appreciate that you love that event because sometimes I think it goes a little under the radar. Oh, also the Bellingham Yacht Club will be having their lighted boat parade.
Do you know the date of that?
Yeah, that is that Saturday, which is the 5th, I believe.
Sounds right.
And they start about 6 o'clock at the yacht club, and they go past the cruise terminal and Boulevard Park, so around between 6 and 6:30.
All right. That's all I had, Michael. Okay. If Brian's still on the phone, I had a question. We had talked about before in relation to housing, trying to identify any inventory of contaminated properties that might be useful for us to consider for redevelopment, cleanup, and housing. And I know you've had a few things on your plate, and you're probably constantly buried, but I just wanted to see if there was any update or just keep kind of prompting to see if there any collaboration with the city on this.
Yeah, thanks, Commissioner. Excuse me. I reached out to Tara again recently to try to nudge that along. I haven't heard back from her. I think we're all doing the juggling right now, but it is definitely still on the radar. And actually, next commission meeting we're going to provide an update on the integrated planning grant work that we've gotten done to date. So maybe at that point, I can at least have a bit of an update for you and have followed up of other opportunities that we could try to work on with the city and other partners. So I'll make that a priority to make sure that on the 8th we have an update, at least where we're at on that concept.
Okay.
So, can I have clarification on that, Commissioner Shepard? Is that property on that the port owns, or property that joint operations between the port and the city somewhere we could clean up?
Yeah, what I asked Brian to look at, and I had a similar ask to Jennifer when she was showcased that GIS, that countywide GIS platform, is are there any properties out there either in the city of Bellingham limits or elsewhere in Whatcom County that are kind of brownfields? They're contaminated, they're hard for the public, the private sector to facilitate the cleanup. And seeing the interest in Department of Ecology to potentially bring 100% grant funding to those if we can put them in the pipeline for housing use. I just want to make sure we're not leaving any stones unturned given the compounding situation we have in housing.
Agreed. No, thank you for that clarification.
Yeah. And this came up at small cities. Commissioner Bell spoke to this today at small cities, and it's on everybody's radar. We all know it, and we're going to keep trying to poke at this and from all different directions and see where we can find some entry points. And then just one other, just a thank you. This clearly came out of a couple different meetings that I've been in this week about the work of our economic development team and just how much appreciation there is around the county for the work of the port during this pandemic period, and the instrumental role that Don and his team and others at the port have played in partnering and being that kind of central cog for all of these different diverse government and nonprofit and business sector agencies to really handle how we deal with this crisis, how we get funds and resources. And you guys just kept coming up over and over again about the quality job you've done and how good you've made us at the port look. So it's always nice when other people make us look good, and you guys are doing that. So I appreciate we're in a tough patch here, and it's going to get worse for the next few weeks. All signs point to that. And so we just want to thank you for your continued effort, and we know we're going to have to keep pushing on with this and doing our best we can. And it looks like you're in your boat.
I was going to say, I think
extra
Don,
points.
I saw that.
I feel like I'm actually sailing right now. It's so rough down here.
I bet.
You're looking a little queasy here, Don.
What's that?
You're looking a little queasy. You need some Dramamine? I can run some in.
These Dexalons move a lot. Commissioner Shepard, thanks so much. As you have heard me more than once say, I've been really blessed with an amazing staff. The team of 4 does an amazing job, and we're so diverse, and we're still working on deals, which is crazy when we think about all the other things we're doing right now. We're probably working on more companies coming to the region than we ever have before. So I'm very appreciative of the staff.
Well, it's just that it's the short game and the long game at the same time. So we're looking to address the immediate crisis and trying to build our capacity for the recovery at the same time. So it's a lot to do, but we're in good hands.
Much.
All right. Any other business?
Yeah, I had a real quick one. I just want to do a shout out to Sustainable Connections and Resources for sitting down with the refineries at the table, and for Eddie Uri for taking that on and coming to some agreements and some compromises, and at least listening to each other on the Cherry Point properties. I think those discussions have been going better than expected, and I think have bridged some gaps that we didn't think would be bridged. So just noticing the progress that's going on out there, because at some point I thought we might lose all of Cherry Point to future development, but it looks to me like people are willing to sit down and listen to each other and compromise, and that's a good thing. And then I also want to shout out to Sustainable Connections, because they have put together a program to keep our small business people solvent during the shutdown period. And they put together a gift card program. If you go to their website, you can just buy a gift card from one of the many small retailers that are out there in the marketplace and keep them afloat. I speak from personal experience that sales are down to almost nothing in the retail sector because people are afraid to go out, and with further lockdowns, it's going to be even worse. So the best way we can do to keep this alive is to support them through some of these gift cards. And I applaud Sustainable Connections for putting that program together and keeping small business solvent during this lockdown.
That's great. Rod, can we make sure we get that out on our social media feed, that link?
Yes, we'll do that.
Great. Okay. Anything further?
One more dockside market coming up. I believe it's on Tuesday, 11/24. That'll be the last one of the year. Dockside market, good stuff happening down there. Direct sales from the fishermen to the fisher people to the public. So head on down there if you haven't done so already.
Did you say that was on a Tuesday?
And Rob,
Oops, I'm about to be corrected. Go ahead, Tiffany.
sorry. No, you were going to be corrected. Sorry, I was going to offer the hours, but I just lost my internet connection at my house. I believe it's 10 to 2. It's a little bit different. It's a little bit shorter hours. Maybe it's 2 to 4, but I'll get that information to you.
So
Tiffany, it's 2 to 4:30 on the 24th.
Yeah, on
Thank
Tuesday
you,
before
Kyle.
Thanksgiving. And there's cod, salmon, what else? Tuna.
Yeah, crab will be there, I believe. Yeah, it should be a good one.
Yeah.
So everybody can stock up before they sit at home and eat Thanksgiving by themselves. Great.
And we appreciate
You look
everybody
really
frequenting
excited
that
when you
market,
said
though.
that commercial. Commissioner Shepard, you look very excited when you said that.
I'm not. We just postponed a family tradition that is longer than I've been alive for Thanksgiving. Never before postponed it or put it off, and we had to do it this year. So,
Unfortunate.
yeah, it's just the way it is. But thank you for that. We'll make sure and get that on our social media as well, so people know about that well-attended dockside event that's been happening and will continue to. Other than that, sounds like we're done. Thank you all, and we are adjourned.